Well, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Liz Stanislawski and I'm the Director of Communications for World Council of Credit Unions. We are so very much looking ahead to the World Credit Union Conference 2026 in Sydney, Australia this July, where global credit union leaders will come together to explore the ideas shaping the future of the movement. Today, I'm super excited because I'm joined by Holly Ransom, a globally recognized leadership expert, CEO of Emergent, acclaimed keynote speaker, and author, known for helping organizations build high-performing teams and navigate change. Holly will deliver the keynote, Sustaining Your Edge, High Performance Teams and Culture. And we're excited to get an early preview of the ideas she'll be bringing to our global audience. So, hello, Holly. It's good to be with you today.
Hi, Liz. Great to be with you too. And hello to everyone, hopefully, that's going to make their way down under a little bit later in the year for the conference.
Yes, we're super excited. And we just want to launch into it. You've got such an amazing background. You've spoken to some really high profile folks. And a lot of this, I know you were shaped at a very early age. Was it your grandmother that said, if you walk past it, you tell the world it's okay?
It was indeed. Yeah, my grandmother, Dorothy.
So, in large, complex organizations, what does that look like in practice for leaders who are trying to drive change but navigating competing priorities?
Look, it's a great question because obviously the challenge there is the implementation. You know, when you've got a lot going on and there's a lot of things you can be calling out, the challenge, of course, is practically you can't call everything out. And the important thing to realize, nor do you have to, but you do have to have built an environment where other people feel safe to do so. Very much as leader, you're setting tone from the top. And so the question becomes not just will I walk past it, but have I actually created a culture where my people won't walk past it? And so I think what's really important is that clarity of standards. And, you know, leaders who do this, I think, really well and really clearly are mindful of small, visible acts of leadership, courage, you know, where they spotlight it. And it doesn't have to be every time that it's them that's calling out something in particular, but they're choosing to highlight a moment where one of their team, I'm thinking about a global mining company that I worked with who were, you know, shining a light on safety, one of their top values in their organization. And they're very adamant on the way the safety principles are meant to come to life and how critical that is at every level in the organization. And I remember one of the moments that drove, you know, real adherence in a level they felt like they hadn't had cut through to prior was a moment their CEO told a story of actually being on site and taking some of their board members through one of their particular mine sites, where one of the most junior staff members on that site corrected a board member who was walking down a set of stairs without a third point of contact, which is, again, a very basic safety principle that they believe layers up to then far more costly safety misses. And so those types of stories where you've got examples of your people doing that and you can create a culture where you're heroing examples of sort of adhering to the standard and not letting those things be walked past, they set a tone and allow your people to feel empowered in the ownership of the standard.
Wow, that's so interesting. And what courage that takes,
Mm,
to speak up and not walk past it. Sometimes if you're feeling intimidated or do I know enough? Have I been here long enough to say
totally.
something?
And I think that's such a great point, Liz, because one of the reasons we often see that this doesn't happen is people have a real worry that this is what I call a CLM, a career limiting move. If I'm the person who sort of says something here, how's this going to go down? You know, is this going to be something where maybe all of a sudden I start to get marginalized or in the culture? By celebrating those sorts of stories and making that clear, that's something we not only recognize, but we reward, we're likely to see that behavior get repeated. And that's the real power of leaders being able to storytell like that. Though to your point with their competing priorities, it's not always going to be them who's doing the calling out. It's creating that culture where people at every level are doing it for them.
Yeah, that is so important. In your work with high performing teams, is there a pattern maybe that you're seeing in teams that are able to sustain their momentum versus those that kind of lose their edge after a while?
It's a really interesting question. And the thing that comes to mind most notably and perhaps most differently, because of course we know there's an element around, we could talk about continuous improvement. We could talk about things that are well-worn sort of realities that remain true. It doesn't mean they're any less true of what high-performing teams do really well. But one that perhaps people might find maybe more surprising is they find a way to bring variety into how they work. We can tend to find that it's very easy, we're creatures of habit, human beings, to get stuck in our collective habits. This is the way we do things. This is the way we've always done things. And over time, not only do we know that those habits can end up getting diluted in their effectiveness because our competition are studying us, they're watching for notes and the opportunity to do things differently or copy our playbook, but they can also start to feel a bit like a grind. There is a benefit of sort of an energy injection that comes with variety. So finding ways to bring just slight variety, fun, energy, and this can be as simple as starting to change a structure of we always have meetings on the same day of the week in the same room with the same agenda. How do you start to play with some of your fundamentals? When I think about some of the elite sporting teams that I work with, they think about their training and how do they inject training in a way that allows their players to be doing something different, particularly at points in their mid-season. The parallel I would create for a lot of organizational change is when you're really in the throes of that tough change management and it's a bit of a slog and we're not quite seeing the results we want yet. The opportunity to play with some of that and think about how do you bring that in as a source of innovation where potentially you get, sparks of new ideas, people exploring or realizing, they can do things a different way. But just at a really fundamental level, you shift the energy state of people. I think previously we thought we had to be in a positive mindset to get the benefit of energy. And increasingly, there's a lot of performance literature that's saying, swap that around, change your energy state and you'll shift your mindset. And that is the easier variable in many ways to control. We can deliberately do things that we know have an ability to change our energetic state. So playing with that idea at a basic unit of how in a week could you do one thing that adds variety into your team's rhythm, you'll be amazed at just that incremental energy it unlocks and the performance benefits of that.
I love that because, yeah, it does maybe seem a little daunting. Well, what can we change? What can we switch up? What can we innovate? But something as simple as changing, like you said, the day or the time of a meeting, or maybe kicking it off in a different way, because otherwise we become robotic and that becomes tiring and we're not as, passionate or energized by the work we do when we are doing the same thing every single day.
Absolutely. So yeah, to your point, even starting with a question that unlocks a bit of humor or allows you to learn something different about your colleagues and have a different feel to what a Monday morning meeting normally feels like. The ripple effect through the rest of people's performance on a Monday or through that week, it can put something entirely different into motion. So these small nudges can make a big difference.
Love that. And you also emphasize the importance of asking better questions, right? So where do you see leaders getting stuck in their thinking right now?
Spent a lot of time on this topic because I'm a big believer in the sort of the quality of our ambition needing to be supported by the infrastructure of how we work. What do I mean? Like all of us want more signal. We want better thinking. But then it comes to, well, what practices have we got in our individual and our collective means of going about how we work as leaders to achieve that? And the biggest thing I notice at the moment, Liz, is that we are giving ourselves informational indigestion. We consume so much content. It's constant, and we all know it's built to be addictive. So sometimes it is very hard to get ourselves off that news feed. And there's also a bit of a pressure we feel as leaders to be informed about everything. And certainly something that the leaders I'm working with and the leadership teams are working with, we talk a lot about, how do we curate those sources more thoughtfully so we're really clear on where we believe we get signal from, what the important things to listen to are, and the noise that we want to be really disciplined about doing our best to block out. Hard to avoid all of it, but we can design deliberately so by default we're not absorbing more than we would otherwise. But the big piece is actually that second part from an informational indigestion standpoint around where's that block of time in your week where you are giving yourself a chance to pause and go, so what, now what? to actually think about what you've taken in and its relevance to what you're working on. The next step you need to take with it, the pull forward to how you're going to take that into a one-on-one with one of your team, or how that might inject a new thought into the strategic planning session. So my big belief is that we need better disciplines to actually allow ourselves to do our best thinking work. Because in reality, if we're constantly stuck in the hamster wheel of absorption, we're not actually giving ourselves the opportunity to do our best thinking.
I would love you to give sort of another, what does that look like in practice? Could you give an example?
Totally. So I think it's about blocking out in your schedule. And some people I know do this as a solo practice. They can do it at the end of a week on a Friday afternoon, and they'll have 2 or 3 reflection questions that they ask themselves. It could be about, what was the biggest insight that I gleaned this week? Or they could make a deliberate practice after they, think about going to a company offsite where you've maybe heard 5 or 6 presentations. You've had someone on economics. When you come down under, think about how much will be as part of the World Congress programming. Now, we take all that in. We're asking a lot of ourselves to assume that if we're not deliberate about our reflective practices, we're going to be able to head back and know how to meaningfully apply those ideas. So it could be that you just sit down, your favorite cafe, or you do it on the plane ride home, or whatever it might be, and say, what was the thing I felt like I had to be in that room to hear? What did it spark for me? What's the reaction I had to it? Why did it land? And then to that, so what, now what? What am I going to do with that? What's the meaning that I'm meant to make of that? The significance that information or that new data point has for me? And then what's my commitment to action? Like, what am I going to do on Monday? Who am I going to ping and say, hey, I'd love you to read about this, or I've just heard this new idea. Could we have a conversation about it next week? And other people like to process out loud. So they're deliberate about putting time with an individual in their diary. It could be someone who heard the same information, or it could be someone that they're going to ping in advance and sort of say, hey, I've heard this new idea, or I've got something that's just really hitting me at the moment that I feel like I need to think out loud about. Could you and I spend some time on this topic? And it could be a 15-minute conversation where you're just talking through it. But it's that deliberate, reflective discipline that we just need to make an allocation of time for in order to support doing our best thinking. Otherwise, I think it's an ambition that we don't have the infrastructure to get the performance out of.
And actually setting aside that time to do it, and not just saying, I'll do it. I'll reflect on
100%. We all have great intentions on this sort of stuff, right? Of course. But it's about, making that deliberate allocation of time. And it doesn't need to be a lot. You'll be amazed by even what, particularly, when we're not in a habit of doing it, 10 to 20 minutes worth of journaling alone can do. So just start small, but make that commitment to building your weekly reps.
Great. So many of the folks who are coming to this conference are leaders who are leading across regions, cultures, markets. What are some of the tensions leaders face when trying to build a strong, consistent culture across complexity?
This is a constant challenge in multinational or cross-regional organizations. And I think the biggest thing that I observe and that leaders in those contexts talk to me about is the challenge of really creating a consistent and aligned understanding of expectations and standards. And so what do I mean there? Well, all of us in our organizations have values that we are focused on, the tenets that we say underpin the way that we want our people to show up, what great looks like, what we aim to be excellent in order to deliver on our stated sort of mission and purpose. But we can have huge variation in the interpretation of those words. If we think about things I see all the time on company value sheets, there would be things like customer centricity, or customer excellence, something of that nature. You see a lot of integrity. You see words like perseverance, and you name it. Now, if I ask that, or I put that phrase to a group of leaders in Asia Pacific, I will get a very different definition to what I will get in Europe and what I would get in North America. And so I think the big thing that leaders across regions, cultures, markets need to think about is, how am I storytelling and spotlighting examples that really help create a common understanding of what these behaviors look like. And how am I doing that regularly and routinely? You know, one of the things that we know about behavior is what we recognize and reward gets repeated. And so it's critical in, you know, I think about some examples of, clients of mine who have had that focus on customer excellence. They'll make a deliberate practice everywhere they go of opening or sharing in a presentation a story that's taken, and they'll consistently vary who it is in different parts of the world, but where they're showing this is what I believe it looks like, or this is what I want us to understand it looks like. And they're not layering that on. They're allowing the storytelling to do the example of consistently demonstrating to their people what great looks like. Because otherwise, we get this huge variation in what people think showing up and doing what the company needs looks like. And so one of the things I find with leaders who solve for this challenge really well is they're very clear on behaviorally what their definition of great looks like. And they're consistent in the way that they spotlight that excellence, drawing on examples from across the region. So there's a clear understanding and everyone knows behaviorally what it looks like to go and deliver on integrity or candor or customer excellence in their particular context.
That's so important. I love the picture you paint there.
Thank you.
We know also that organizations often leave moments of insight feeling very energized, right? Like, oh yeah, let's do this. We can do this. This is great for our organization. But
Yep.
then struggle to translate that into action, or Monday morning after the conference comes along and we're back in it and it doesn't get translated into action. Why do you think that gap persists and what can we do to close it?
This is a very big question because it consistently comes up. And I'm a big believer, while it's so great that we do get fired up and it's so important that we get fired up in those moments, I often joke if the inspirational afterglow washes off in the shower, then the conference or the meeting or whatever it was hasn't done its job. So I think one of them gets to something we were talking about earlier, which is we oftentimes with our agendas and programming, and this can be in our personal practice or it can be in our collective design, we don't actually give ourselves that pause moment, that reflective time that we spoke about a moment ago, where we get to digest and reflect and think about the application of the ideas we've heard to the things that I'm working on and doing. And if we don't do that, we're sort of demanding a lot of ourselves. I think we're being a bit unrealistic about our expectations that via osmosis, all those new ideas alongside everything else we're thinking about and juggling are going to land and are going to land in a coherent fashion and sort of inform the way, to your point, that you show up on a Monday morning. So I think it's really critical that we find that time to, while we're in that motivated state, because that's a great energy to try and harness, to not allow ourselves to get out of that zone without spending that 15, 20 minutes. Even a great strategy I've seen leaders use is to commit themselves to action by, in that moment, sort of writing a note to one of their colleagues about their commitment that they're going to take. I've just been at, the World Credit Union Congress and, this is the thing that really hit me. And next week I want to try and do this. So they actually find a way of holding their own feet to their fire by announcing out loud the commitment they're going to take, which is a great way of doing it. Others might, write a note and say, hey, I'd love to lock in a meeting next week. I've got an idea I want to talk to you about. So again, committing to that next step that sort of anchors the energy of the moment to an action that we're taking next week. The other thing I'd just quickly say that I think we let ourselves down with a little bit is we demand too much of what the first step looks like. We are talking about a room full of very busy leaders who have extraordinarily demanding jobs and who do not have capacity to go back on Monday next week and spend 80% of their time on all the new ideas and information they've been buzzing about ever since the conference. So we've actually got to challenge ourselves to do that prioritization and say, what's the most important idea or the needle moving thing that I want to action first? And let me challenge myself to break it down into a 24-hour action step that it is inexcusable I could finish Monday without having completed. Momentum is our greatest ally when it comes to driving any kind of behavioral change, but often we sort of try and go too big. We seek to optimize before we establish, whereas we should work to establish and then build those reps up to optimize.
It's like you got in my head, Holly. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me. It's like these big ideas and this is how we're going to do it and this is great and I can't wait. And then I'm like, wait a second, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't think that I can do this. And then instead of focusing on that first step of that
Yep.
bigger picture,
And it's that
I
energy
can't
is
be the
so
only one
great.
in that.
We just don't want to let it, become, to your point, overwhelmed, because we've added this another huge thing to our already very full plate. Whereas we
Right.
start small, like as you know all too well, when you feel like something's moving forward and you're making steps and you feel like you're winning and things are getting ticked off the to-do list, there's a natural kind of self-reinforcement that comes with that. So let's try and take
Mhm.
advantage of that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I also know that you've done extensive work around inclusion and equity. How do you see inclusive leadership shaping performance and outcomes in today's environment?
It's an interesting one because this language obviously has become quite controversial and political in recent times, and it's interesting spending a lot of time with leaders of industry. That while we might feel at the moment that the language needs to shift by virtue of it feeling baggage laden or having a political angle that is not sort of intended or desirable by virtue of its use, certainly the organizations I see that are getting the most out of their people remain deeply committed to designing workplaces where their talent that they employ can show up and bring the best of themselves. And that's ultimately what that idea is about. I mean, I'm actually here on site with Amy Edmondson, the woman who is credited with coining the term psychological safety.
Mm,
And her research has proven, that we certainly, when people feel that they can take risks, when they're able to show up and be present as their whole self, there are performance benefits to that. And consistently, I see that across contexts and across industries. So, for me, the leaders who are continuing to get the best out of their people are asking themselves a really practical question, that is, what are the specific barriers in our processes or our systems, our culture, our communication, that are preventing people from being fully present and fully effective? And they're
mm,
systematically working at removing those barriers. Anything that's getting in the way of individuals being able to be at their best is something that any high performing organization I know wants to find a way to reduce. And so for
mhm,
me, that's the way we should be reframing this notion at the moment. I think it's a shame that these principles of wanting to allow everyone to get the best out of themselves and then collectively harness the best of our performance has, I think, gotten a little bit lost in the political noise at the moment. But the
mhm.
fundamentals and the bona fides of what we're driving at there, I think, remain the same and are consistent amongst the industry leaders that I still see, earnestly working at this internally.
Mhm, mhm. Holly, what do you think is one leadership assumption that needs to be challenged right now?
I could give you
That's a
lots
big
of
one, I
answers to
know.
this. Yeah. Um, all right, I'll go with this one. There's a couple that flood to mind, but I think we're in this interesting moment, and perhaps it relates to something we touched on earlier, which is informational indigestion. So it's not unrelated to that idea that more communication equals better communication. I mean, Liz, you're probably better across this than I am, but I'm astonished by the reports that I read about the number of messages that people are bombarded with on a daily basis at work, between Slack channels or Teams threads or, what's happening in certainly on email and text messages and you name it. I mean, it's upward in most reports I read of over 150 separate communications per day, which you think about, one, the attention disruption of that and the time that it takes for us then to sort of meaningfully reset, but also the confusion that creates. What message am I meant to prioritize? What does this email mean relative to this thing I heard over here? What takes priority, etc. And I think our people are already overwhelmed by volume. And it's interesting because there has been an adage in communications, particularly through change, where, yeah, you would have heard something similar to it. Like the time that you're sort of sick of talking about it is the time they're probably first hearing it, which is not wrong in a lot of ways, but I think taken in the wrong fashion has meant that we've gotten in this pattern of sort of volume and repetition, as opposed to stepping back and actually challenging ourselves to go, how do we make our communication more meaningful? And could subtraction actually be assistive with allowing our messages to land? One of my favorite quotes of all time is, I think it's attributed to Groucho Marx, and it goes, the biggest illusion of communication is the belief that it's occurred. Like the idea that I spoke and therefore you heard. And I
Mhm.
think we can get caught in that notion. Like I projected or I spoke or I sent the email, therefore my team heard and understood, or therefore the room had clarity and those types of things. And I think we really have to challenge ourselves to say, um, what do I need to say? What do I think people need to feel or do differently? And what's the best way to create that exchange? So I think we really need to challenge this volume game we've got into with communication. Less is more.
I could not agree with you more, Holly. And of course, I'm partial to that answer because I am a communications director. But I can't tell you how many times I have had that quote that you just mentioned on a slide when I'm giving a
Oh, it's so
presentation.
good, isn't it? It's brilliant.
It's so good and it's so true. It's like, people want more communication, more communication, more communication. And I'm always saying, instead of talking about what we need to add, what is it that we can subtract? And then getting that
Yes.
impactful message out there even more. Because if you're bombarding people and they're getting too much, the message isn't coming in clearly.
And you're probably seeing this too, but I really wonder and worry about where this goes next with AI, because the speed at
Mhm.
which with AI assistance we can draft communications, the volume of emails in theory that I could send, or the amount of communication I could send on a daily basis, is has
Mhm.
increased exponentially. So the discernment required for that is getting is going to be an even more important leadership practice, because the ease of doing the alternative is that much more seamless.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, 100%. I just have one more question for you, Holly, and then if there's anything else that you want to add, I'd be happy to have you speak for a couple more minutes. But as you prepare to speak with this global audience in July, this global audience of credit union leaders, what are you most looking forward to exploring with them?
Well, firstly, as you can tell from this accent, I'm an Australian originally, so I'm very much looking forward to welcoming you to Australia and the beautiful part of the world that is Sydney. So I look forward to being able to be an ambassador for Australia while we're all there together. But look, for me, I mean, I have an absolute love of engaging with leaders who are at the top of their game and are hungry to continue to raise the bar. And this for me is the excitement around talking about a topic like sustaining high performing cultures and teams with such a diverse group of leaders. You know, the opportunity to hear your reactions, to share some of the collective genius of things that are working for you that can enrich, your colleagues and counterparts from other part of the world. You know, for me, these tools, habits, I want to be able to give some suggestions that offer you genuinely new ways of thinking about how you can approach the topic of high performing teams, and things that you can take home, and to something we've talked about, Liz, genuinely use on Monday.
Mhm.
For me, that's the excitement of this conversation and the opportunity to have such a global dialogue with such a group of talented, high performing leaders. So I can't wait for the conversation.
We can't wait either, Holly. Is there anything else that you want to add or tease ahead that people can look forward to in your keynote?
Oh, look, I think we've covered a lot in our conversation here. You know, what I can promise you is a lot of energy, as you've probably got a sense of, a lot of very practical ideas, and really importantly, what I want to do is offer you tools, specific habits, leadership moves that can assist you in creating a thriving team environment that can help you show up and execute at another level. So that for me is the promise of what we're going to cover in that session.
All right. Well, we look forward to it. Thank you, Holly, so much for joining us and sharing your insights. We're so grateful for this preview of the ideas you'll bring to the Credit Union Conference this July 2026. You still have time to register for those of you who would like to learn more about innovation, leading high performing teams, and network with other credit union leaders around the world. Again, Holly's keynote, Sustaining Your Edge, High Performance Teams and Culture, will take place on Tuesday, the 21st of July. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference.
See you there.